The sledgehammer bounced off the reinforced concrete barrier like it was hitting solid bedrock. Barbara Fitzgerald stood there in her pristine business suit, sweat beading on her forehead, staring at the immovable 15-ton architectural planter that now blocked what she considered her road. The bronze lettering embedded in the concrete face caught the morning sun. Brooks Construction, beautifying Pine Valley, since 1955. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice cracking with the kind of rage that comes from a lifetime of getting her way. "This is illegal. This is harassment." I adjusted my hard hat and checked my clipboard with the calm professionalism that comes from 20 years in construction. "Actually, Barbara, it's perfectly legal. These are architectural landscaping features on my property, installed with proper permits." I gestured to the serpentine course of concrete barriers that now turned the previously straight road into a slow-speed obstacle course. "Emergency vehicles can still pass through, just like the code requires. 6 feet, 1 inch clearance." Her face went purple. Behind her, 50 cars sat in a line, stretching back to the county highway, horns honking, residents late for work. The same residents she terrorized for years, with her endless violation notices and arbitrary fines. "I'll sue you into bankruptcy," she sputtered. I smiled and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "Good luck with that. See, here's the thing about concrete, Barbara. Once it sets, it's permanent. And according to the 1955 deed I found in my grandfather's files, this road you've been calling HOA property for the past 5 years, it's actually Brooks family land. You've been trespassing." The color drained from her face as she realized what I was holding. Property surveys, original deeds, legal documentation, going back 70 years. Everything she thought she'd buried when she quietly moved the property lines in 2019. "Impossible," she whispered. "My grandfather always said to keep good records," I replied. "He also said that bullies only understand one language." Turns out, he was right about that too. My name is Logan Brooks, and this war started 3 months ago when my grandfather Henry passed away and left me his cabin in Pine Valley. Grandpa Henry wasn't just family to me. He was my mentor, the man who taught me everything about construction, and, more importantly, about standing up for what's right. We'd built that cabin together with our own hands 20 years ago, every foundation post and concrete pillar, a testament to honest work and fair dealing. The cabin sat on beautiful property at the foot of the Cascades, surrounded by towering pines and granite outcroppings that made you feel like you were a million miles from civilization. Grandpa had chosen the location carefully, building on land his father had purchased in 1955, when Pine Valley was nothing but wilderness and logging roads. The will had an odd line that I didn't pay much attention to at first. "Remember, son, we own more than just the cabin. Check the 1955 deed." I figured it was just Grandpa being cryptic as usual. Looking back now, I should have paid closer attention to that message. Grandpa Henry was never one for unnecessary words. He'd built Brooks Construction from nothing, starting with a single wheelbarrow and a determination to do every job right. By the time he retired, we were pouring foundations for half the commercial buildings in the county. He taught me that reputation was worth more than any quick profit, that your word was your bond, and that sometimes the hardest thing to do was also the right thing to do. The first time I drove up to Pine Valley after the funeral, I was hit with a wave of memories. The smell of pine trees, the gravel crunching under my truck tires, the way the morning light hit the cabin's concrete pillars that Grandpa and I had poured together. But my nostalgia was interrupted when I spotted a woman in her early 50s taking photos of my cabin with a calculating look on her face. She was dressed in a crisp business suit that seemed entirely out of place in the rustic setting. Everything about her screamed corporate authority, from her perfectly manicured nails to her cold, measuring gaze. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping out of my truck. She turned to me with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "I don't recall being notified about any visitors to our community," she said, her voice cold as fresh concrete. I pulled out my keys and the paperwork from the lawyer. "I'm Logan Brooks, Henry's grandson. This cabin belongs to me now." Her eyes narrowed to slits. "Brooks? I don't remember that name on our Homeowners Association member list." I couldn't help but chuckle. That's because this cabin was built in 1970, long before your HOA even existed. She stood there silent for a moment, her fake smile twitching at the corners. I'm Barbara Fitzgerald, president of the Pine Valley Homeowners Association. We'll need to review your situation. The way she said review made it sound like a threat. Within the first week, I received 15 violation notices. 15. The concrete driveway had unauthorized patches, even though those repairs were from 1,990. My construction trailer was deemed an eyesore, despite being parked behind the cabin. My truck was too commercial for a residential area. Each notice came with a fine, and each fine came with Barbara's signature and a little smiley face next to it. That's when my neighbor, Tom Sullivan, stopped by with a 6-pack of beer and a warning. "Welcome to Barbara's kingdom," he said, shaking his head. Last year, she drove out 3 families. Good people, too. All of them lived here for years before Barbara took over. Tom was a friendly guy in his mid-40s. The kind of neighbor who'd help you pour a driveway without being asked. But when he talked about Barbara, something dark flickered in his eyes. "Just be careful, Logan. She's got her husband Brad backing her up, and he's a lawyer. Not a good one, mind you. But he knows enough to make your life hell with paperwork." Barbara's harassment campaign intensified over the next month. She would patrol past my cabin every morning at 7 sharp, taking photos of my construction equipment from every angle. The violation notices became more ridiculous. Concrete dust on vehicles exceeds cleanliness standards. Construction materials visible from road. Commercial vehicle parked in residential zone. Each notice came with escalating fines. Other neighbors started whispering when I passed, and I heard through the grapevine that Barbara was telling everyone she was going to make an example of me. The situation reached a new low when Brad sent a certified letter on legal letterhead from his law firm, Fitzgerald and Associates, though I was pretty sure he was the only associate. "Mr. Brooks," it read, "you have 30 days to comply with HOA regulations, as outlined in Bylaw 15.3.2. Failure to comply will result in the HOA exercising its right to control access to the private roads serving Pine Valley. This is your final warning." Barbara had included a sticky note with another smiley face, and the words TikTok written in purple ink. That's when she made her biggest mistake. Barbara called an emergency HOA meeting to propose a new road maintenance fee of $500 per month for all properties. The fee would ensure their roads remained pristine and properly maintained, she explained to the packed community center. When I stood up to object, pointing out that my cabin had its own concrete driveway, that I maintained myself, Barbara's mask slipped completely. "Oh, but you do, Mr. Brooks," she said with that cold smile. "You have to drive through our roads to get to your property. No pay, no access." Her husband Brad nodded like a bobblehead doll from the front row. "From a legal standpoint, the HOA has every right to control access to its private roads," he said in a nasal voice that made me want to pour concrete in his mouth. The meeting ended with Barbara giving me 30 days to comply or face appropriate measures. Most of the other residents kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact, like she was Medusa herself. I noticed the Hendersons, an elderly couple who'd lived here for 20 years, actually flinch when Barbara's gaze swept over them. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me quietly in the parking lot. "Be careful," whispered Janet Morrison. "Barbara has ways of making life miserable for anyone who stands up to her. She once fined the Garcias $3,000 for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox." Monday morning arrived with a surprise that made my blood run cold. I loaded up my truck with rebar and forms for a foundation job, only to find my path blocked by a massive iron gate where the Pine Valley entrance used to be. It was 10 feet tall, electronic, with a keypad entry system, and a sign that read, "Pine Valley HOA, members only, authorized access required." Barbara stood next to it, in a pressed burgundy suit, her smile so wide it looked painful. "Oh, Logan," she called out in a sing-song voice. "I forgot to mention at the meeting. We've upgraded our security. Only paying members get the gate code. I'm so sorry for any inconvenience." She wasn't sorry at all, and we both knew it. That night, I went through Grandpa Henry's files systematically. Tucked between old construction permits and rebar invoices, I found it. A deed from 1955, with an interesting clause. Easement granted to future residents of the valley for passage across Brooks' family property. I read it again, then checked the map on the wall. The property lines were different from what Barbara had shown in her presentation, off by about 20 feet. According to this document, the road everyone used to access Pine Valley wasn't HOA property at all. It was Brooks' property, and the HOA only had an easement, which meant the right to use it, not own it. I called Tom immediately. You mentioned a surveyor who's been working this area since before Barbara showed up. Mike Johnson, Tom replied. I'll bring him by tomorrow. Logan, there's something else you should know. But Mike should be there when I tell you. The next evening, Tom arrived with Mike Johnson, a no-nonsense guy in his 50s with calloused hands and sharp eyes. Mike spread out a large map dated 1955 on my kitchen table. Look here, he said, tracing the property lines with his finger. Your grandfather's father owned all this land, including what's now the main road into Pine Valley. When developers came in the 70s, he granted them an easement, which means they could use the road, but never owned it. Mike pulled out another document. Here's the kicker. In 2019, Barbara quietly had the fence lines moved, shifting them about 20 feet onto your property. She filed new documents with the county, but they're fraudulent. The original deed supersedes everything. I stared at the maps, my mind racing. So you're saying the road Barbara's using to control access to Pine Valley is actually on Brooks' property? Mike nodded grimly. She's been trespassing for 5 years, and she knows it. That's why she's trying to force you out before you discover the truth. Tom leaned forward. I wasn't just Emily's brother, Logan. I am a licensed private investigator. After Emily died, I couldn't let it go. I moved to Pine Valley, became the friendly neighbor, and I've been watching Barbara for 10 years. Every family she's forced out, every dirty trick, every fraudulent document. I've recorded it all. Tom pulled out a thick binder. 10 years of surveillance. Photos of Barbara meeting with county officials before the property line changes. Records of her targeting specific families. Financial documents showing she's been skimming from the HOA funds to pay for her lifestyle. Did you know she charges the HOA $1,500 a month for administrative services that consist of sending out violation notices? The depth of Barbara's corruption was staggering. She'd built an empire of fear and fraud, all to cover up years of systematic theft and abuse of power. I felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all. But then I remembered something Grandpa used to tell me when we were working with concrete, and I'd get frustrated with a difficult pour. Justice isn't about revenge, son. It's about making things right. Sometimes that means tearing down what's wrong so you can build something better. I made a phone call to Danny Morrison, an old Marine buddy who ran a trucking company and owed me a favor from Afghanistan. Danny, remember that time in Kandahar when I saved your ass? I'm calling it in. I need 3 trucks of construction materials delivered tomorrow. Rebar, forms, and enough concrete to build a bunker. And Danny, make sure one of the trucks has an accident right at the entrance to Pine Valley. At 5:30 the next morning, I was positioned perfectly to watch the show begin. 3 trucks loaded with steel beams, rebar, and construction materials rumbled up the mountain road. The lead driver, Danny's cousin Rick, was a master of his craft. Right at the entrance to Pine Valley, directly in front of Barbara's precious electronic gate, there was a tremendous crack. The truck's axle snapped, and tons of steel beams and rebar spilled across the road like giant pickup sticks. The second truck, trying to avoid the mess, jackknifed, spilling its load of concrete forms. The third truck, carrying bags of concrete mix, managed to stop, but was now blocking the road completely. By 6 a.m., I was already on scene in my construction gear, hard hat and all, looking every inch the concerned contractor, worried about his expensive materials. Officer Martinez arrived first, and I could swear I saw him trying not to smile. Morning, Logan. Looks like you've got quite a mess here. I put on my best worried face. Officer, this is $100,000 worth of materials for the new medical center project. Each beam needs to be carefully inspected for damage before we can move them. These are load-bearing beams. You understand? Martinez nodded sagely. Of course. Safety first. How long do you think cleanup will take? I made a show of examining the steel carefully. Well, with proper safety protocols and crane availability, maybe a week. Can't rush structural steel. You know what OSHA says. Barbara's meltdown was glorious to watch. She arrived at 7 sharp for her morning patrol, only to find her precious road completely blocked. Her face went from confused to furious to purple in about 30 seconds. By 8, she was screaming into her phone at the police dispatcher. By 9, 50 cars were lined up, honking their horns, and Barbara was standing in the middle of it all, looking like she might spontaneously combust. While I was slowly cleaning up the materials over the next few days, my real plan went into action. 5 of my best construction workers arrived with concrete trucks and equipment. Using the forms from the accident, we began constructing 12 massive concrete barriers, each 8 feet by 8 feet by 4 feet tall. But these weren't just barriers. They were architectural concrete planters, reinforced with enough rebar to stop a tank. Each one weighed approximately 15 tons when filled. We worked through the nights, pouring concrete with quick-set additives, creating geometric patterns in the faces. On each barrier, we embedded bronze letters: Brooks Construction, beautifying Pine Valley, since 1955. The barriers were so well made, they qualified as permanent architectural installations. But the real genius was what went inside the planters. Working with Tom late at night, we planted very specific vegetation: ginkgo trees, which produce fruit that smells like rancid butter when it falls; Bradford pear trees, whose beautiful white flowers emit an odor reminiscent of rotting fish; and my personal favorite, Titan arum bulbs, also known as corpse flowers, which would bloom in about 30 days with a smell exactly like their name suggests. By day 6, I had arranged the concrete barriers in a strategic pattern along the road. Cars now had to navigate a serpentine course between 15-ton concrete blocks. The gaps were exactly 6 feet, 1 inch, the legal minimum for emergency vehicle access. Cars had to slow to 5 miles per hour and carefully weave through, turning a 30-second drive into a 7-minute crawl. The community reaction was swift and dramatic. Day 6 saw residents complaining to Barbara about the delays. Day 7 brought the first wave of service refusals as delivery drivers and mail carriers declared Pine Valley too difficult to access. By day 8, the chorus had become deafening. "What did you do to make him do this?" they demanded at the emergency HOA meeting Barbara had called. The conference room was packed beyond capacity, and the mood was uglier than exposed aggregate. Barbara stood at the podium, her usually perfect appearance cracking like bad concrete. "Logan Brooks is terrorizing our community. He's destroyed our quality of life with this concrete prison." But the residents weren't buying it anymore. "No, Barbara," said one woman I didn't recognize. "The question is, what did you do to him? Henry Brooks lived here for 50 years without causing anyone trouble. His grandson's been here 3 months. And suddenly, there's a war." "We've been talking, Barbara," another resident cut in, "about the Martinezes, the Patels, the Jacksons, about how anyone who questions you gets driven out, about how you've turned our community into your personal kingdom." The meeting dissolved into chaos, and Barbara fled with Brad scrambling after her. As she passed my seat in the back, she hissed, "You think you've won? I'll destroy you for this." I just smiled and whispered back, "Good luck, moving 15 tons of concrete." Barbara's desperate attempts to regain control became increasingly unhinged. First, she hired some local thugs to destroy the concrete barriers under cover of darkness. Unfortunately for them, I had embedded motion sensor cameras in the concrete itself, capturing everything in crystal clear, high definition. All 3 men were arrested before they could even scratch the surface. Next, she tried to ram through the barriers with her Lexus. But concrete reinforced with rebar doesn't care about luxury vehicles. She managed to total her car while residents filmed with their phones. The footage went viral with the caption, "HOA President versus Concrete. Concrete wins." The smell apocalypse began on day 10. The ginkgo trees, helped along by massive amounts of fish emulsion I'd been liberally applying each morning, began dropping their putrid fruit. The Bradford pears bloomed early, filling the air with their distinctive dead fish scent. By day 12, property values in Pine Valley had dropped 15% according to online real estate sites. Pizza places refused to deliver. The mail carrier left packages at the gate. Even Amazon drivers took one whiff and marked packages as undeliverable. The tipping point came when Channel 7 News showed up to report on what they called The Great Pine Valley Stink-Off. Barbara, trying to save face, gave an interview where she completely lost it on camera, screaming about construction terrorists and assault by concrete and plants. The reporter barely contained her smirk as she signed off. Reporting live from Pine Valley, where revenge is apparently set in stone and smells like rotting fish. That evening, alone in my dark cabin, I sent Barbara a text message. "Meet me at the cabin tomorrow night. Come alone. We need to end this." She arrived at dusk, having walked the 2 miles from the gate through the increasingly pungent air. Her designer shoes were ruined, her clothes disheveled, and her face showed the strain of the past 2 weeks. I had set up the cabin with battery-powered work lights, and my laptop sat open on the table. "Sit down, Barbara. I have something to show you." What she wasn't expecting was to see herself on the screen, 10 years younger, stumbling out of her Lexus on a dark road, looking at something in front of her car, then driving away. The security footage was grainy but clear enough. You could see her face, the license plate, even the HOA gala banner visible through the back window. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean. I thought it was a deer at first. And then I saw her. But she was already. I panicked. That's when Tom walked in." Barbara looked up at him through her tears, and recognition dawned. "You're Emily's brother." Tom nodded, his face carved from stone. 10 years, Barbara. 10 years I've waited for this moment. "You have 2 choices," I said, my voice steady, despite the churning in my stomach. "Option 1. This video goes to CNN, Fox, every major news outlet. You'll lose everything, and spend what's left of your life in prison." Barbara's sobbing intensified. "Option 2. You resign as HOA president immediately. You confess to the community about all your abuse of power, the fraudulent property lines, the harassment. You pay restitution to every family you've wronged, starting with $500,000 to Tom for Emily, and you leave Pine Valley forever." I set a timer on my phone. "You have 60 seconds to decide. Starting now." With shaking hands, Barbara grabbed the resignation letter I'd prepared and signed it. "I'll do it. I'll confess everything. Just please don't destroy my children's lives. They're innocent in all this." Tom's eyes bored into mine. He nodded slightly. "Your children don't deserve to lose their mother to prison," I said. "But they also don't deserve to be raised by someone who thinks she's above consequences. Go fix your life, Barbara. Build yourself into someone they can actually be proud of." The special HOA meeting the next night was standing room only. Barbara stood at the podium, looking small and broken for the first time since I'd met her. "I have something to tell all of you," she began, her voice trembling. "For the past 5 years, I have abused my position as HOA president. I have harassed and driven out families who did nothing wrong except question my authority. I have manipulated property lines for my own benefit. I have embezzled funds from the HOA treasury to pay for personal expenses." She went on to detail specific instances of her abuse of power, each confession drawing shocked reactions from the crowd. "I will be paying full restitution to every family I've wronged. I'm also paying $500,000 to a fund in memory of Emily Sullivan." At the mention of Emily's name, Tom stood up from his seat in the back, tears streaming down his face. That's when Brad stood up. For 20 years, he'd been Barbara's enabler, but something had finally snapped in him. 20 years, he said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. 20 years, I've watched you turn from the woman I married into this. I knew about Emily, Barbara. I've always known. I helped you cover it up because I loved you, because I was weak, because I was afraid." He pulled out a manila envelope and threw it on the table. "Divorce papers. I'm done being your accomplice." The community voted unanimously to remove Barbara and the entire HOA board. Tom was elected as the new president, and his first act was to void every single, ridiculous rule Barbara had put in place. The road maintenance fee was eliminated. The property lines were officially corrected. My concrete barriers, which had served their purpose, were converted into actual architectural features with proper plantings, turning the entrance to Pine Valley into a genuinely beautiful garden that also served as traffic calming measures. Most importantly, the cabin was designated as the Emily Sullivan Memorial Youth Center, where I would teach construction skills to local kids, passing on the knowledge my grandfather had taught me. 1 month later, I was teaching a group of teenagers how to mix concrete properly when Danny walked in with his phone and a huge grin. Dude, you're not going to believe this. He showed me a video titled, "OA President Tries to Steal My Property, So I Turned Her Neighborhood into a Concrete Maze," with over 100 million views. The top comment read, "This is better than Netflix. When's the movie coming out?" That evening, Tom and I sat on the cabin porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Pine Valley had never been more peaceful. Kids were playing in the youth center's yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "You gave Barbara what Emily would have wanted," Tom said quietly. "A chance to rebuild herself into something better." I thought about justice and revenge, about the thin line between them, about the choices we make when we have power over someone who's wronged us. "Grandpa used to say that concrete is permanent," I replied. "Once it's set, you can't undo it. So before you pour, make sure you're building something that will stand the test of time. People deserve the same chance, I guess, to set properly, to become something solid and lasting." As the credits rolled on our strange story, a text popped up on my phone from an unknown number. "Saw your story online. I'm dealing with a similar HOA situation in my neighborhood. Can you help? P.S. Definitely not another HOA president, I swear." Tom read it over my shoulder and chuckled. Round 2. I cracked my knuckles and grinned. Better order more concrete. Looks like Brooks Construction is expanding into HOA consulting. And somewhere, I'd like to think Grandpa Henry was smiling, knowing that his legacy lived on, not just in concrete and steel, but in the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the whole world seems stacked against you. Because in the end, that's what real justice looks like. Not just punishment, but the chance for redemption. Not just tearing down, but building something better in its place. Concrete sets permanently, but people, given the chance, can still change their shape.